Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. It was supposed to be a peaceful morning in a dream house by the ocean until a baby shower invaded the backyard, a war with the HOA erupted, and one man fought back with blueprints, cameras, and the law. This isn't just a property dispute, it's personal. It was supposed to be a quiet Saturday morning. The sun had just started to crawl over the edge of the Pacific, spilling gold across the glass panels of my living room. I was barefoot, coffee in hand, standing in the middle of the home I had designed myself, every corner measured, every angle intentional, a minimalistic sanctuary on a bluff near Santa Barbara, away from the nonsense of downtown, away from people. I didn't build this house for entertaining. I didn't pour my soul into blueprints so someone's cousin from Fresno could use my teakwood benches to pop balloons and eat finger sandwiches. I built it for solitude, for perspective, for peace. So imagine my face when I glanced out of the window and saw a human flood moving through my side yard like it was a goddamn theme park. Balloons, folding chairs, plastic flamingos, coolers, a baby stroller, 24, closer to 26 people. Marching in through my side gate, which I had stupidly left unlatched the day before after a delivery. They flowed in with the casual entitlement of people entering a hotel lobby, not private property. I froze, coffee halfway to my mouth. My brain needed a second. I blinked once, twice. They were already unpacking sandwiches on the stone path. A man in a pink polo and wraparound sunglasses unfolded a table. A woman in a floral maxi dress was adjusting a Bluetooth speaker, connecting her phone. Pop music began pouring out, slicing through the silence like a chainsaw. I stepped outside slowly, trying not to let the rage sprint ahead of my mouth. "Hi," I said flatly. Most of them ignored me. One of the women, tall, overly made up, carrying a glitter-covered diaper cake, turned and smiled like I was a waiter who'd finally arrived. "Oh, good. Are you the guy? Is this the right gazebo?" I stared at her. "The what?" She looked briefly confused. "The gazebo. Karen told us it was okay. She said it's part of the Seacrest Bluffs HOA and it's first come, first served for events. We booked this spot for the baby shower weeks ago." That name, that damn name, Karen. Karen Strailing, 57 years old. HOA president, homeowner tyrant, blonde bob, suburban stormtrooper energy. I'd only met her twice in passing, and both times she'd managed to work the words uniformity, property values, and community cohesion into a 30-second interaction. The woman made small talk feel like a zoning hearing. "This isn't HOA land," I said. "This is my backyard." Another woman chimed in without looking at me. "Karen said you're like a renter or something? That this whole bluff area technically belongs to Seacrest. She said it's in the shared easement clause." "There is no easement," I replied, my voice sharpening. "I designed this property. I own this lot. It's registered, deeded, and surveyed. This land, the hedges, the path, and that gazebo are all private." Now I had their attention. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others just looked annoyed. The guy in the pink polo shook his head. "Look, man, we've already set everything up. You can't seriously be telling a pregnant woman to move her party." I could feel the pressure building behind my temples. I hadn't even had half a cup of coffee, and I was already being gaslit on my own soil. "I'm not telling anyone to do anything yet," I said evenly. "But you're on my land without permission." The side gate wasn't an invitation. The tall woman scoffed. "This is really inappropriate. You're making a scene. We'll talk to Karen." She said she cleared this. I took a deep breath, stared at the line of mini sandwiches being placed on my cedar table, and then turned around without another word. I walked back inside, grabbed my phone, and began scrolling through the contact folder I never thought I'd need. Legal. I could already feel it. This wasn't over, and knowing Karen, this wouldn't just be a misunderstanding. It was about to become war. I gave them 10 minutes. 10 minutes to pack up their balloons, finger sandwiches, and performative laughter and get the hell off my property. I even said it politely the first time. That was my mistake. The response? Murmurs, eye rolls, a man with a receding hairline whispering to his wife, loud enough for me to hear. What a psycho. It's just a damn gazebo. By minute 11, I was no longer polite. "Time to leave," I said, stepping forward. "Now." The man in the pink polo, the same guy who'd been unfolding tables like it was a public park, decided to puff up his chest and step toward me. "What, you're gonna throw out a pregnant woman's baby shower?" he asked, voice dripping with performative outrage. "I'm going to remove trespassers from my private property," I replied. "If you want to reframe that into a Facebook post for Karen, be my guest." And that's when things shifted. Somewhere behind the crowd, a man pulled out his phone and made a dramatic show of unlocking it, staring at me, and then speaking loudly into the receiver. "Yes, hello. Yeah, we're here at the Seacrest Bluffs community area, and there's a man with a gun threatening people at a baby shower. Yes, with a weapon. He says he owns the place, but he's shouting and being aggressive." I felt my stomach twist. "Are you out of your goddamn mind?" I snapped. "I don't own a gun. Nobody's threatening anyone." But he was already pacing with purpose, walking down my garden path like he was rehearsing for a courtroom drama. The crowd turned. Now they were all looking at me like I was the unhinged one, like I wasn't the one being invaded. "Great," I muttered. "Just great." I went back inside, tossed on a neutral-colored hoodie to avoid looking like some militia lunatic, and grabbed my folder, the one with the title deed, property survey, county lot map, and 2 sets of signed registration documents. Then I pulled the footage from my home security cameras, 4 angles, all in glorious high resolution, everything from the moment they came through the gate. 12 minutes later, I heard the sirens. 2 patrol cars pulled up and parked on the road outside my gate. Uniforms stepped out, hands already on their belts, eyes sweeping the scene. And there I was, standing halfway down my gravel path, holding a manila folder and feeling like a suspect in my own backyard. One officer approached the guy who made the call. I watched from a few feet away as he delivered a wild retelling. Man with gun, threats, aggression. The officer glanced over at me, then walked my way, his partner following. "You the homeowner?" he asked. "Yes," I said, handing him the folder. "This is my lot. Everything in that folder proves it. I'm also happy to provide footage from 4 security cameras. And just for the record, no gun, no threat, and I've asked them to leave multiple times." He opened the folder, eyes scanning. The other officer leaned over his shoulder, nodding. "Okay," the first one said. "Let's take this one step at a time." I led them to the gazebo, where most of the party was still lounging, now awkwardly silent. One kid was crying. The speaker had been turned off, thank God. The woman in the floral dress started talking immediately. "He just came out of the house screaming at us. We were told this was a public area." Karen said, "Ma'am," the officer interrupted, "this man has provided legal documentation confirming this is private property. According to the county parcel registry, this land is not part of Seacrest Bluffs HOA." But Karen said, "Karen isn't the county clerk," he said firmly. Then came the clincher. I handed over the USB drive with the security footage. The officers walked back to their car to check it. A few minutes later, they came back. "No weapon, no threats. In fact, we're now considering the original call as a false emergency report," the officer said, now noticeably less patient. "That's a misdemeanor offense in this county." The guy with the phone shrank back. "I didn't know," he muttered. "Karen just told us it was okay." "I don't care what Karen told you," the officer said. "You made a call about an armed threat that never existed. That's serious." After a warning and some long, tense glares, the guests started to pack up. It was a slow and sullen retreat, like children being told to leave a playground they didn't pay for. Pink polo guy threw a final parting shot over his shoulder. "You didn't have to make such a big deal out of it." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean I didn't have to defend my own home from people too lazy to confirm where they were?" He didn't respond. As the group finally funneled out through the side gate, now securely locked behind them, one of the officers lingered. "Just so you know," he said, "you handled that well, better than most. But if this happens again, you call us first. Don't let them flip the narrative." I nodded. "Appreciate it." And with that, they were gone. I stood alone on the gravel path, the last echoes of entitled footsteps fading, the smell of coleslaw and entitlement still hanging in the air. I looked at the crumpled napkins and used paper plates on my stone table. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next morning, I found the note stabbed through the slats of my gate with a cheap plastic steak knife. I stood there in my robe, coffee going cold in my hand again. Clearly, this story would have a caffeine deficiency running theme, and just stared at it. The letter was printed in bold Times New Roman under the Seacrest Bluffs HOA Enforcement Committee header, complete with a clip art logo of a seagull and a lighthouse, as if bad graphic design made their fake authority more legitimate. Notice of non-compliance. You have interfered with communal enjoyment of shared HOA space. As per guidelines outlined in Section 4.7 of the Community Recreation Use Policy, you are required to allow access to the designated relaxation area Gazebo for HOA residents upon request. Continued obstruction will result in formal action. Below that was a signature in all caps. Karen Strailing, President. No legal letterhead. No citation from county zoning. No parcel numbers. Just empty threats dressed up like an invoice from a Soviet-era summer camp. I laughed. Out loud. Once. Then I walked inside, pulled up the county registrar's website, printed 4 separate confirmations that my land was not and had never been under the Seacrest Bluffs HOA jurisdiction, highlighted the parcel boundaries with an orange Sharpie, and wrote across the top in red ink, "Try again." I stapled my reply to their letter and duct taped the whole bundle to the inside of my locked gate. But of course, that didn't stop them. Later that day, a delivery driver knocked on my door, holding a thick envelope. Some lady dropped this off at the clubhouse and said it was urgent, he muttered, clearly uncomfortable. Said it was court-related. It wasn't a real court document, obviously. It was a printed HOA violation summons, summoning me to an official disciplinary hearing to take place Wednesday at 7 p.m. inside the Seacrest Clubhouse multi-purpose room. Underneath, it stated, "You are expected to attend to respond to charges of obstruction, aggressive conduct, and failure to adhere to communal etiquette." I swear to God, I almost framed it. They were calling me to a kangaroo court for not letting random people sit in my gazebo. I didn't reply. I didn't show up, but I did forward a copy of that fake summons to my lawyer, Frank Truman, along with the HOA note and a photo of the knife still lodged in the wood like a suburban Excalibur. Frank's email response, "This is already escalating into harassment. Start a record, every note, every interaction, every witness." So that's what I did. I set up a separate hard drive. Every camera clip, every copy, every stupid HOA flyer got scanned, time-stamped, and backed up. That night, I noticed someone standing outside my fence, just far enough from the gate not to be trespassing. A silhouette, phone held up, clearly taking pictures. By the time I walked out with a flashlight and called out, "Can I help you?" they were already power walking away. I couldn't see their face, but I could guess. It wasn't just paperwork anymore, it was surveillance. By Tuesday, 2 of my neighbors, ones I barely knew, had started giving me strange looks when I drove past. Another one turned their sprinklers on as I walked by, just a little too perfectly timed to be accidental. Karen wasn't just coming after me with papers, she was coming for the narrative. By Wednesday, I'd installed another camera on the exterior fence and began drafting an official cease and desist with Frank's help. It was time to stop treating this like petty nonsense. They wanted to play court? I'd show them what real legal fire looked like. I'd always thought the phrase "lawyer up" was just something you heard in movies, usually before someone flipped a table in a diner. But by Friday morning, I was sitting across from Frank Truman, sipping bitter office coffee and watching him flip through a growing stack of HOA bullshit with an expression I can only describe as legal disgust. "They actually called this a summons," he said, tapping the printout with his pen. "Yup," I said. "Delivered via neighborhood UPS Jesus." Frank shook his head and muttered something about unlicensed morons with Xerox machines. "This isn't just HOA overreach," he said. "This is targeted harassment and an attempt to establish illegitimate authority over land they don't control. You know what we do with that? We fire back. We fire back hard." That's how Phase 2 started. First, Frank submitted a formal request for jurisdiction confirmation to the Santa Barbara County Land Use Department. The goal was to officially, on public record, declare that my property had zero legal or contractual ties to the Seacrest Bluffs HOA. He also requested a parcel clarification review to be stamped, signed, and added to my title file. Something bulletproof with county seals and barcodes, the kind of thing even Karen's laminated flyers would melt under. Second, we filed an official police report against Karen Strailing personally for harassment, impersonation of authority, and possible incitement of a false emergency call. The report included the 911 transcript, the footage of me not holding a gun because, again, I don't own one, and the camera angle showing the guy calling and grinning as he described me as armed. The officer at the station raised his eyebrows at that part. Third, Frank prepared a preliminary civil complaint citing defamation, nuisance, and invasion of privacy. He didn't file it yet. It was just a warning shot. But we sent a formal cease and desist letter to both Karen and the HOA board, attached with 17 pages of evidence, maps, legal references, and photos of me literally building the gazebo with my own damn hands. Their reply? Nothing. At least, not at first. Then on Monday, just as I was starting to breathe again, a new letter arrived, this one certified in a manila envelope with a return address from a law office I'd never heard of. Inside, a civil claim, filed by none other than Karen Streeling and Seacrest Bluffs HOA. Claim, boundary dispute. According to the letter, recent evaluations suggest that the structure referred to as the gazebo encroaches on HOA-managed community buffer space as outlined in early planning maps filed during the original Seacrest development phase. In plain English, they were now claiming my gazebo was on their land. Frank stared at it, blinked slowly, and said, "They really want to die on this hill." "I built that hill," I muttered. "I know exactly where it ends." Karen was trying to legally rewrite the map. According to her new fantasy geography, my property's southwest corner, where the gazebo and path sat, was part of an unresolved border zone that had never been formally demarcated. Total fiction. The county maps were crystal clear, but fiction in court still costs money to beat. So Frank filed a counter motion. He also submitted a request for a formal survey, a full-scale boundary inspection from the county's independent land engineers, which we insisted be admissible in court. And because I wasn't taking chances, I hired a private surveyor of my own. Two, in fact. One to survey and one to watch the first guy to make sure nobody was getting cute with the measurements. And then I added more cameras, this time along the fence line. Karen had declared war by map. I was going to answer with geometry, GPS coordinates, and a chainsaw if necessary. That night, I installed a backlit sign on my gate that read, "Private Land. Title 3. B. Not subject to HOA. Trespassers will be recorded." I didn't care if it ruined the community aesthetic. I wasn't trying to blend in. I was trying to win. It was a strange experience, watching your land get measured like it might be someone else's. The county sent 2 survey engineers on a gray Thursday morning. They showed up in identical vests, carrying laser transits and clipboards, and spoke with the robotic cheerfulness of men who'd measured hundreds of suburban fence lines and rarely encountered resistance more complex than an overgrown rosemary bush. Until today. I'd already cleared the path to the gazebo and printed out parcel maps, but it didn't stop the tension from humming in my chest like a low-voltage wire. One of the engineers, a guy named Louis, looked up at me as he set down his equipment. "You're expecting trouble," he said. "No," I said. "I'm expecting Karen." And as if summoned by the sheer gravitational pull of her own ego, there she was, Karen Streeling, HOA president, flanked by a man in a crisp blazer and a ponytail, their expert, and a second clipboard-wielding woman I recognized as the HOA's compliance coordinator, which apparently was a real title given to people who loved bureaucracy but failed the TSA exam. They weren't just observing, they were challenging. Karen immediately insisted that her team's surveyor, Mr. Ponytail, be allowed to conduct his own parallel mapping, citing inconsistencies in community overlays dating back to 2007. She pulled out a faded blueprint on thin legal paper, waving it like a spell. Lewis, to his credit, shut that down fast. "County contract trumps HOA overlay," he said. "We're here under court order. This survey is final." Karen didn't like that answer. She huffed. Ponytail sulked. The compliance woman scribbled notes like she was trying to invent a language. The measurement process began. Laser rangefinders flickered. Flag stakes were driven into soil. Coordinates were cross-checked against GPS benchmarks. I stood silently while Louis and his partner worked with methodical precision, pausing only to confirm elevation changes and alignment with archived parcel drawings. At one point, the HOA's surveyor pulled Louis aside and tried to argue about historical precedent. Louis replied, "You can't precedent your way into someone else's backyard." That earned him a silent thumbs up from me. After 3 hours, Louis handed me a sealed folder and said, "We'll send the full report to the court. But I'll tell you now, your property line is exactly where your documents say it is. That gazebo, it's yours. No question." It should have been over, but Karen wasn't letting go. Later that evening, I got an email from Frank with an attached video. "You're going to love this one," he wrote. It was security footage from the external camera I'd installed facing the southwest fence line. The video showed Ponytail, Karen's expert, circling the gazebo area earlier that afternoon, after the engineers had left. He was alone, measuring tape in hand, kneeling near the base of the structure, then pulling something from his pocket and tucking it beneath a paving stone. Frank had already enhanced the footage and zoomed in. It was a metal survey marker pre-engraved. He was trying to plant fake evidence, something to discover later and claim as a historic boundary point. We filed an immediate addendum to the civil response, citing attempted evidence tampering. Frank forwarded the footage to the court and demanded that Karen's side produce chain of custody records for their surveyor's data. Predictably, they couldn't. The judge didn't issue sanctions yet, but the mood shifted. Now Karen's legal team was on the defensive. And just when I thought that would be the end of the week's madness, the mailbox hit me again. Another letter, this one from the county's Public Records Office, responding to a Freedom of Information Act request Frank had filed 3 weeks ago. It contained an internal report from the Sheriff's Department, not a public one. A performance review of Officer B. Yanks, the cop who initially responded to the 911 call at my house. The file included disciplinary notes, a few minor complaints, but tucked in the margin of a supplemental memo was a sentence that made my stomach lurch. Concerns raised regarding Officer B's relationship to KS, Seacrest HOA president, possible conflict of interest, ongoing property dispute, recused from related future calls as of March. I read that 3 times. Karen had a personal connection inside the Sheriff's Department. She didn't just bend the rules. She'd built her own damn catapult and launched herself over them. I stared at that sentence like it was a glitch in the Matrix. Concerns raised regarding Officer B's relationship to KS, Seacrest HOA president. It explained everything. The weird vibe during the first police call, the hesitation, the reluctance to acknowledge the obvious. Karen hadn't just lied to the guests. She'd likely influenced the initial response itself. I forwarded the memo to Frank, who replied less than 5 minutes later, "This is gold. We're adding it to the civil record and preparing a supplemental complaint for corruption and misconduct." By that afternoon, Frank had filed an ethics complaint with the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Internal Affairs Division demanding a formal investigation into Officer Banks's relationship with Karen Streeling. The complaint referenced the body cam footage, the delayed response to my submitted evidence, and now the official record confirming conflict of interest. But that was only half of it. We also submitted the surveillance footage of Karen's surveyor attempting to tamper with boundary markers directly to the civil court, citing attempted fraud. Karen's legal team tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, claiming the man was double-checking dimensions, but the judge wasn't having it. "You don't double-check dimensions by burying metal discs," he said flatly. The court issued a formal warning to the HOA's legal representation. One more infraction, and they'd be sanctioned. For the first time since this whole circus started, Karen was backed into a corner. And then something miraculous happened. Neighbors started talking. First, it was Mike from 2 doors down, the quiet retired Navy guy who always mowed his lawn like he was prepping for a military inspection. He knocked on my door the next morning, cap in hand, eyes tired. "I just wanted to say," he said, "I saw what Karen did to you. You're not the only one." He told me how Karen had pressured him last year to remove a flagpole from his front yard because it was too tall and visually disruptive. When he pushed back, she threatened to fine him and launched a safety inspection of his property. He had to hire a lawyer to get her off his back. Later that week, a younger couple, Amy and Derek, approached me as I was trimming the hedges. She told us the back fence line was encroaching on HOA land, Amy said. Turns out it was her who had misread the map. We spent almost $5,000 moving that fence, and now seeing your case. They looked pissed, not just on my behalf, on their own. And that's when it snowballed. Frank and I compiled the statements, and by the end of the week, we had 7 written declarations from Seacrest Bluffs homeowners detailing similar experiences, each one involving Karen misrepresenting her authority, inventing HOA regulations, or leveraging fear of penalties to control personal property. Some even admitted they'd stayed silent because of fear. Karen had positioned herself as the queen of the neighborhood, backed by law enforcement favors and HOA technicalities no one wanted to challenge. But now she was losing that crown. A local news station, Channel 4 Santa Barbara, picked up the story after someone leaked the body cam footage. It aired that Sunday. HOA president accused of harassment and corruption. Homeowner pushes back. The segment showed clips of the gazebo, the security footage, and even me, blurred slightly, speaking outside my gate. It also showed the line from the sheriff's internal review, now public record. Suddenly, I wasn't just the angry guy with the private gazebo. I was the guy who finally said no to Karen Streeling. Within 48 hours, HOA members began demanding an emergency meeting, and that's when I knew the real collapse was coming. The hearing took place in Department 6 of the Santa Barbara County Civil Courthouse, under dim fluorescent lights and the watchful eye of Judge Cynthia Marquez, famous for her no-nonsense demeanor and a face that hadn't smiled since the Clinton administration. I sat beside Frank at the plaintiff's table, wearing the only suit I still owned that didn't smell like drywall and salt air. Across from us sat Karen, flanked by two lawyers who looked like they charged by the syllable, and who, despite their sharp tailoring, were already visibly sweating. It was showtime. Karen's claim was simple on the surface. The gazebo sat within what she called a buffer easement, a strip of land that, according to her, had never been properly mapped during Seacrest Bluffs subdivision decades ago. Her team presented the same faded map she'd waved in front of the county engineers, along with blurry photos of landscape plans from 2006. Frank let them talk. Then he stood, calmly placed a stack of official county documents on the clerk's table, and dropped the independent survey reports, complete with timestamps, GPS plots, and notarized parcel boundaries. Next, he played the video, the one where Karen's surveyor tried to plant a metal marker under my paving stone like he was burying treasure for future litigation. You could hear the oxygen get sucked out of the room. Judge Marquez didn't even blink. She just leaned forward, turned to Karen's side, and said, "Are you aware that presenting fraudulent evidence in a civil case is grounds for immediate dismissal?" Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. One of her lawyers whispered something that looked a lot like, "We're screwed." Frank wasn't done. He submitted the public records findings connecting Officer Banks to Karen along with the internal memo confirming his recusal due to conflict of interest. Then he introduced the statements from 7 neighbors, all detailing patterns of coercion, threats, and fabricated violations. And finally, he handed over a copy of our cease and desist and cited the ongoing police investigation into the false 911 call and harassment campaign. The courtroom was dead silent. Judge Marquez sat back, adjusted her glasses, and said, "Let the record reflect that the property in question, parcel number 84273B, is confirmed as privately owned and not under the jurisdiction of the Seacrest Bluffs Homeowners Association." She paused. Further, the court finds the actions taken by the HOA to be not only unfounded, but bordering on malicious. Karen twitched. The judgment awarded me $125,000 in damages, legal fees, defamation, and nuisance compensation. The court didn't impose criminal charges, but she referred the 911 matter to the DA's office for review. Frank turned to me and whispered, "That's the sound of a gavel shutting a mouth." Outside the courthouse, reporters were already gathering. Microphones, cameras, flashes. Karen exited first, covering her face with a manila folder. Someone shouted a question about the survey tampering. She didn't respond. I walked past the crowd, didn't stop, didn't smile, but I could hear the buzz. The HOA board held an emergency vote 3 days later. Karen was removed as president by a landslide. Only one abstention, and rumor had it that was her husband. Within 2 months, the board disbanded entirely. The HOA was dissolved by member vote, citing a loss of confidence and irreparable liability exposure. Seacrest Bluffs, for the first time in decades, was free of rulers, and my gazebo untouched, unclaimed, unbothered, just as it should be. 3 months later, the clubhouse was gone. Well, not gone exactly. The walls still stood, but the insides had been gutted. No more beige folding chairs. No more passive-aggressive flyers about holiday wreath sizes. No more laminated bylaws pinned next to the coffee machine like sacred scripture. Instead, the place buzzed with something entirely new: life. Kids from the neighborhood were running around with sketch pads, pencils, and foam core models of buildings that made no engineering sense but had heart. Retirees wandered in with thermoses and curiosity. A banner stretched across the old entryway. Seacrest Design Lab, powered by Community Designed by Freedom. Yeah, that was my idea. After the settlement, I kept just enough to cover legal fees, upgrades, and the new camera system that could probably survive a minor drone strike. The rest I donated to the local Creative Foundation on the condition that the old HOA clubhouse be repurposed into an architecture learning center. No rules, no committees, just open access. I taught one class a week, mostly kids, on how to draw their dream homes. Sometimes they looked like castles or spaceships or towers made entirely of hot tubs. But every week, I made sure to teach them one thing first: where the boundaries go. Meanwhile, Karen, last I heard, she sold her house and moved inland. Some whispered about a quiet settlement with the DA. No jail time, but a permanent black mark on her community record. A new family lives in her house now. They've got a trampoline in the yard and don't care if their mailbox is off-tone. Good. As for me, I finally took the time to finish the landscaping near the gazebo, laid new stone around the path, trimmed the hedges a little wider, restained the benches, repaired the vine trellis where some balloon streamer had once wrapped itself like a plastic parasite. Then I added a new sign, not large, just tasteful, mounted on a hand-cut piece of redwood. This gazebo was built by my hands, on my land, with no one's permission but my own. Not for rent, not for compromise, not for HOA use. Questions? Ask the architect. No one has. Most days now, it's quiet. I sit out there in the mornings with coffee that's finally hot, ocean wind on my face, and the occasional giggle from the studio down the hill. The gazebo belongs to no one else. Not anymore. Not ever again. And in this stretch of coastal soil, measured, mapped, and mine, that's enough.